Hello and welcome to another episode of Life Size Voices. My name is Umer Farooque and I am the founder of Life Size Media. Today we have a very special guest with us. I had the pleasure of meeting him when I visited Winnipeg to launch Bob Molly's book, Get Comfortable Being Uncomfortable. I was actually in the audience of his podcast with Bob Molly, and I have to admit that I did shed a tear or two when I was watching him speak to Bob. It was very inspiring, and I got to learn so much about our guest here today. He is the author of the book One Drop of Water and the newly released book called The Monarch Butterfly Effect. He is also a speaker and a mental health advocate. None other than Jason Tyler McLean. Thank you so much for making the time to speak with me.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. It's a blessing and a privilege every time I get to get on and talk with someone new and share some stuff and have some fun. So I'm excited to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Absolutely. I I felt, I reached out to Bob and I thought I was thinking of the best person I could have on this podcast. And the first person that came to my mind was you, because I read a couple of excerpts from your book and then obviously I watched that podcast. So, Jason, just for our viewers who aren't familiar with your story, if you could just share a preview on what your life was and what you had to go through to become the person you are today.
Sure. Um, so in 2019, on November 19th at 9:45 a.m., I decided that was the time, and I was going to end my life. And I picked up a gun and disengaged the safety. It was fully loaded. It was a brand new firearm, and I put it in my mouth and I pulled the trigger. And it jammed. And by power of God, the universe, Mother Nature, whatever you want to believe, what I believe, I had this miracle where the gun jammed and I failed in attempting to take my life. And what's ironic is that it was failure was one of the driving components that led to that point in my life where I was so low, so empty, so depressed, and lonely, that it would be failure that actually saved my life and gave me a second chance. So, but up until that point, I was 47 years old when that happened. I'm 53 now, and statistically, that is the most common age for a man to commit suicide in Canada. And I was unaware of these statistics and metrics at this point. And before that, I had gone through about a 2 year bout with depression, and I was abusing alcohol and drugs to self medicate and numb all the pain and loneliness and emptiness I was feeling. And instead of asking for help or looking for healthier solutions, I just continued down this spiral to where I got to the absolute bottom of my soul. And I didn't want to kill myself per se. It was more of maybe I wanted to, I wanted to end the pain. I wanted to end this monster that had been reigning in my mind my whole life. And so, um, leading up to that, I had lived a quite a wild life. I was I was put into situations as a young child that are very difficult, a lot of abuse, abandonment. I was tortured and sexually abused ongoing by my dad's second wife, and just it propelled me into like a spiral very early in life as well. And my dad rest his soul in peace. He was a horrible alcoholic and very violent man back then. He later got himself sober and changed, but there was a lot of tough stuff going on with at home with him. And getting into my teen years, I was wild and out of control. I ended up living on the streets for over 2 years when I was a younger kid, and that was devastating. And I ended up joining street gangs and escalated into more of a very violent life. And again, somewhere that my anger, my pain was kind of celebrated. But I also felt like I belonged in that, and sort of stayed in that kind of dark world for a long time. So all those compounding things definitely, and in my entire life, I ran away and I hid from my challenges. I was terrified of being alone. I was terrified of what was in here. And I never confronted them or tried to heal myself. And so these got worse and worse as I got older. But after November 19th in 2019, I was given that second chance. And it took me a couple months to sort of figure out that I wanted to fight for my life. I was still quite angry that I didn't succeed. And I had a lot of sort of a tornado of very mixed emotions about being alive still and what I wanted to do. And so I one day I just said, enough is enough. I'm going to fight for my life here. And I've always been a fighter and a bit of a tough guy, and but never when it came to myself. And so I just started writing like crazy, and I've always loved writing, and I've written poetry and stories and things my whole life. And I started writing everything out. It became so therapeutic and cathartic that it eventually inspired me to write a book. And I wanted to write a book first and foremost for myself to help really contain the understanding and the strategies that I use to heal myself from depression, from anxiety, from the PTSD of so many ongoing experiences in my life. And so I wrote this book called One Drop of Water, my first book, and autobiographical autobiographical for sure, but at the same time contains a lot of lessons and nuances, and kind of brings all these things in together. And I wanted to use just enough of those rose-colored lenses to still have a positive and hopeful message, but very raw, vulnerable, and real at the same time, and expose the true darkness I went through with depression so that other people could relate to it. And it was an incredible experience writing the book. At times, it drove me insane. I wanted to throw my computer through a window many times, and very frustrated. But when it all came together and it came out, it did extremely well on Amazon. It was supported and sold in I think 13 out of 17 marketplaces all over the world, and it went into the top best-selling books when it first came out, and continued to stay in a really good climb in the mental health category, which was amazing. But what was more important to me about that is it meant that people were taking this book seriously, and it was helping people. And we all want a financial reward. We all want, the accolades and all the things from anything we pursue in life. And this is a bit of a business, obviously, as well. But for me, the truest reward came from the conversations I started having with so many people. And when they start saying things like, "Your book saved my life," "Your book changed my life," what you said in this chapter about catching frogs, I now do this with my kids. And that kind of stuff to me is the ultimate. Is just the biggest. I wear it like a badge of honor. And so with that came a lot of opportunities to start speaking and getting in front of people. And then next thing I know, I have CBC flying me out to put me on a documentary, and I'm being on these shows and this, and I'm talking in front of, kids at schools, to, treatment centers, to organize, like, just crazy. And so it was this, it was all the things that I really believed would happen for me. Um, there was a point in my life where I had nothing. Like when I attempted to take my life, I had lost everything. I had no money. I had no food in my fridge. My car, I had a beautiful Grand Cherokee that got repossessed, and I had nothing. And except for I had this dream that I was going to do this with this book, and I was going to change the world, change my world, and anybody that came into that, we were going to interact together, and these beautiful, positive things would happen. And so that really happened, and it was great. And then a couple years later, my dad got really sick,
Yep.
and he ended up dying of stomach cancer. And that was horrific and devastating to me. My dad was my best friend, my superhero, my mentor, everything. Taught me everything good about being a man. Once my dad got sober, he was just this incredible, powerful, and peaceful human. And I was just in the process of writing my second book, The Monarch Butterfly Effect. And then, so that happened, and I got, it was really difficult. And then 9 months later, I'm out for a ride on my Harley, and I hit a spot on the highway they were repairing and didn't repair it properly. I'm going 110 kilometers an hour, and I hit this thing, and I go flying off my bike. My bike explodes into pieces. I rolled down the highway for 350 feet, starting at 110 kilometers an hour. So I shouldn't be alive right now. I should have, at best been a quadriplegic if I would have survived it, which I did. But when that was happening, there was a voice in my head that said, "You're not done yet." And it was my father's voice. And so after I had so much physical and mental trauma from that accident, it again kind of got in the way of me being able to write. I mean, physically, I had casts on, I couldn't type, and I was pretty banged up mentally, but I eventually got it done. And so the Monarch Butterfly Effect is my second book, and it's basically about how I went through these really challenging times. Here 2019, I attempted to take my life. That's not that long ago. Then my father dies, and then I, basically am supposed to die in this motorcycle accident, and I'm still here. So I wrote this book that became a more of a specific sort of guide to personal transformation, and how I stay true to the values, insights, concepts, philosophies that I created in my first book. And so again, that book took off, and it's done exceptionally well. And I have it out on audiobook now. I'll give you guys a little peek at it because I don't know if you had a copy. So that's it there. But yeah, so that's kind of the very short Cole's notes. Jason Tyler McLean's life. Short list there. But so that's where we are today. And again, I'm out speaking like it's Mental Health Awareness Month, and I just was at a school earlier today that had adopted my transformation triangle into their curriculum. So I was speaking in front of all these kids, and that was wonderful. And going into different organizations and planning out some mental health safety plans and all that. So it's great, right? It's just the way I like to be is busy, 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 and that's my life in a nutshell for you there.
Thank you so much for sharing all that. And I think back to what I said in the beginning, your story is very inspiring. And these things, especially the motorcycle accident, I think that happened after I met you, and I did see that on your Instagram, and I just read through the description of what you were experiencing and what you just mentioned. I'm not done yet. In your
Yeah,
father's voice, that is very powerful, because
yeah,
a lot of people go through trials and tribulations in all ways, shapes, or forms. I mean, you went through an accident, you went through your father's death, you got a second chance at life. But what matters more is how you come out of those trials and tribulations. Because regardless of who you are, what your background is, and where you come from, what matters is what you do with the fate that has been handed to you. So, I really
absolutely.
love that. And you mentioned something that I actually say pretty often to my authors, and you write this book for yourself before you write it for the people around you. And
Absolutely.
this the business of books is obviously become a very, very big industry, and the majority of the books coming out nowadays have no substance and have no value. But with your book, given your story as well, the fact that you wrote it for yourself just shows how powerful it is. Because as an individual who went through what you went through, especially with getting a second chance at life, putting that into words in a raw and vulnerable way is going to speak much louder than an individual who is just a mental health expert writing a book, or a consulting book. So I think
Yeah,
that's what really differentiates and made your book so successful. But tell me, with the new book, the title is very interesting. I mean, the Monarch Butterfly Effect. If you could walk me through how you came up with that title, and more importantly, what do you hope readers can gain from reading the book?
sure. So the Monarch Butterfly Effect was actually a chapter in One Drop of Water. And so um, when I wrote that chapter, what I did is I looked at I think in these symphonies, and these symphonies are always outside the sort of box of normality. And I wanted to incorporate, like, everyone can read about different philosophies and ideologies, and cognitive behavior therapy, and compartmentalize all that stuff. But I wanted to find things that were not related to psychology per se, and see if I could work with those. So I looked at the butterfly effect in the beginning, which comes from chaos theory, which it was originally for mathematical chaos theory for predicting unpredictable weather systems. And from that was originated by a mathematician named Eric Lorentz in I think 1967. And a couple years later, when they were in a conference about this thing, they had kind of come up with this example where they talked about a butterfly flapping its wings, say in Texas, and the inertia of those wings carry across the world to Malaysia and cause a monsoon. And so the principal dynamic of the butterfly effect is that small changes in a larger system can dramatically, have these huge ripple effects. So I looked at that and I said, what if I applied that to our thoughts, to our ideas, to our actions? And that's how I started to, look at this butterfly effect. And then so that was great, but then I had to make it my own. And so growing up, my father had instilled this incredible love for me with flowers and gardening and all the pollinators. And his favorites were the monarch butterfly and ruby-throated hummingbirds. I happen to have both those tattooed on my hands in memory of my father. And so I had this love for monarch butterflies. And so I thought, what if I put together, I used the butterfly effect, but then I used the monarch butterfly, which is an iconic symbol of transformation, and looked at the metamorphosis of that animal. And metamorphosis is a Greek word that basically talks about there's transition or change through these different cycles in life. So, for instance, a frog goes through a metamorphosis. It starts as an egg, tadpole, frog. And most insects go through 4 stages. And so the monarch butterfly goes from being an egg to a caterpillar to a chrysalis and then emerges this beautiful flying orange animal that we all love. And so I wanted to use that as sort of my foundation for this new philosophy I was going to bring to the world in my new book. So it breaks down into basically when we look at things, if we always start like an egg, which is sort of we're reborn or rebirth or whatever you want to call it. And then we go into this caterpillar stage, which is all about consuming and growth. Caterpillar, becomes 2,000 times its original size in 2 weeks. And it's ferocious in appetite. And so if we can sort of adapt that on a metaphorical level with learning and habits and all that and feeding ourselves with positivity. And then we go into this chrysalis stage, and that's where the caterpillar forms, this skeleton, and it goes inside of there, and it basically dissolves into this soup, and then reforms this butterfly. So it's a time of introspection and redesign, and architecture of the mind, and engineering our thoughts and all this stuff. And then when we get through that, we emerge as this butterfly, and then we're able to go and be this more vibrant version of ourselves and go and pollinate in the gardens of the world, right? With people and with minds and all these things. And so the monarch butterfly effect is a combination of the small actions, the small ideas, when they're believed that are going to have these big ripple effects. And then how do we transform ourselves to continually be able to do those and apply it into our life, into our own life cycle. And in doing so, creating a guide and a roadmap for people to walk through all those stages so they can transform themselves. I always say in my first book, and I've said in this book, there is no purpose without transformation. There is no transformation without purpose. And so vice versa, right? So this book is all about helping people become who they really are and overcoming the fears, you know, uh, silencing the critics, the doubts, all the stuff that holds us back, and pursuing the right path in the right order in a state of growth or metamorphosis, right? And so um, this book is a call for action. It's not just it's not a typical self-help book that's full of regurgitated stuff like you'll see in a Jay Shetty book or a Mel Robbins book or whatever, where they all say the same things. And all that stuff. And if you like that stuff, that's great. I don't personally. I like stuff that's raw. It's real, and that's what this book is. It's a continuation of my lived experience, and then putting together this new philosophy of the Monarch Butterfly Effect and applying it in real time, and then sharing it with other people so they can benefit and change their life through transformation.
What an interesting concept. I mean, I was familiar with the butterfly effect, but I think the way you've broken it down and then you've also humanized it for the average person to then go and implement this into a three-stage strategy that they could use for themselves. I think that's very interesting. And you mentioned, the average self-help book is just repurposed content that's been running on for generations now, and I agree with you, and that's kind of why I do what I do. But I think what's most important is we're all different,
Mhm.
but at the same time, we all face very similar challenges in life. And with storytelling, especially in the form of a book, the whole purpose of reading and being able to share your story in its raw form is so people can actually resonate with it on a deeper level. Yes,
Yep.
I can be a subject matter expert and I can say mental health is X, Y, and Z, and this is the solution to your problems. But unless I speak about those specific problems in a personal context, nobody's going to understand me
100%.
or be on the same
100%.
wavelength as me. So I think that's why your books have done so well, and obviously your story is nothing short of a miracle, not one miracle, but a combination of multiple miracles. But it's so fascinating how you've come up with this. Jason,
Thank you.
what is the overarching objective? Like, what do you want to be known for at the end of the day? Is it somebody who went through trials and tribulations and used that as power to inspire others, or is it somebody who just didn't give up? I mean, I think the viewers would really like to learn what you want to do with all these experiences that you've gained.
Well, I think it's a combination of both things you mentioned. Definitely that, resiliency is one of the more important things, right? Being purposeful and flexible in our drive to never give up. And the other is, yes, I absolutely want to be someone that impacts other people and positively influences them, gives them hope, gives them the tools that they need, but in a realistic and honest way. And for me, if I was to leave a legacy behind, which I will, it's I want to die knowing that I'm still helping people that I'll never meet. And whether that's helping them get through addictions, whether that's helping them find themselves, find their way home, become a better person so they can be a better parent or lover or friend, whatever it is, that's the most important thing. And I want to. When I started this whole thing, and people told me I was crazy, and I loved it, and I'm so thankful they all doubted me. But I said I would change the world, and I am changing the world, and I will continue to change the world, and I'll be doing it by leading by example. And I'll never put a thing in my book that I personally haven't applied in my life. And that's like we were talking, like we just said, some of these other books. And you know what? If they work for you, they're great. There's no criticism here, no judgment. Um, but without that true attached emotionality because of the experiences, and then you're explaining how to get through that, that will resonate and connect with people forever. And that's what I want to be remembered for.
Key word over here is impact. That is the key word. And you mentioned your doubters, you mentioned people who didn't believe in what you wanted to strive to achieve, and every individual on this planet who achieved greatness was doubted many,
Mm-hmm.
many, many times. And that is your fuel. If
Yep.
everybody loves you, you're not doing something right. If
Yeah.
there's a large portion of people that dislike you, you're either an asshole or you're trying to do something that's going to change the way they think and see the world.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I love that is the word I was looking for, because that is what I get from your books. That is what I get from your story. It's impact.
Thank
Jason,
you.
I wanna end this podcast off with one last question.
Okay.
Sometimes people don't like reading. Nowadays, people don't even have the attention span to read anymore. But for
Yeah.
the individuals who don't have the time, what is the one philosophy you want them to take away from your books and your life that they can incorporate into their own lives, regardless of where they are and what stage they're at?
Um, for the strongest philosophy, my personal and that I'd share again is that transformation doesn't happen without purpose, and purpose doesn't happen without transformation. And so many of us are disconnected in our lives because we don't have purpose. And I think what's happened is we've been pushed to believe the long view of purpose. We have to solve our purpose of life and all these things. But when we put purpose in every active moment with intention, we can change so much quicker. And whether it's our mental health, whether it's addictions, whether it's we just want to be better at a business we're starting, and we want to silence, the inner doubt, because we spoke about, people doubting us. A long time I doubted myself more than other people did, and so, but when we can find the way through, you have to do some work. We have to be honest. We have to be real, right? Not and we have to we have to have our accountability and responsibility within what our role is within our healing, and so. But the greatest thing is definitely is that we can find purpose and reconnect with ourselves, which will reconnect in our lives and then other people. The more disconnect we have, social media, impulsive this and everything's so fast nowadays, and overconsumption of all this stuff. We're not in a strong state of mind anymore. It's being jeopardized by this. Just it's too fast for our brain to keep up with. Slow down. Create purpose in your day. Create purpose in your moment. Be intentional. And most importantly, you got to learn to believe in yourself, because none of this matters if you don't believe in yourself. I was stacked against all the odds, and I believed that I would continue and continue and continue. And that's what I do every day. So grateful, belief, and purpose. Put those all together, and you become unstoppable.
Love that, Jason. I
Thank
really,
you.
really like that. And I want to leave the viewers with one quote that I have from another author that I work with. He talks about 10 more steps, and he's a mountaineer. He's climbed Everest and the seven highest summits in the world.
Nice.
And his whole life philosophy is also about leading with purpose, but not
Yep.
being overwhelmed by what you're dealing with, right? Because even when you're climbing, you climbed your own summit. Actually, no, you climbed many summits.
Yeah, it seemed that way.
And with each individual summit that you climbed, you learned a very valuable lesson. Many, many different lessons, but one core lesson from each individual summit. And we can take that as human beings, we can take that in two ways. We can either complain, and the question usually is, why me? Or we can look at, okay, so what is this going to teach me? What am I going to learn from this? And how am I going to move forward? And I think you've answered that in the best way possible. You just have to find purpose in every single thing that you do. We have this overarching purpose, and that's what social media tells us. But what's more important is, what is the purpose in each decision that we make? And then how does that combined then go into the overarching purpose? So I appreciate you for sharing that, Jason, and thank you so much again for making the time to speak with us.
Absolutely.
And I look forward to more books coming from you, and I will make sure that we add links to your book and ensure that your social media
Thank
is
you.
also added so people can find you easily.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much.
No
It was
problem.
wonderful talking with you.
Likewise. Thanks so much, Jason.
Awesome, man. Thank you.